and welcome to the Astranti Top 10 Most Likely Unseen Issues for the Operational Case Study of November 2018, where we are looking at GymFit. So essentially, in this video, I'll be going through what I consider to be the most likely issues that will come up in your exam in November. So this will give you a good chance to be prepared when that time eventually comes. Now, there are some reasons why I've chosen these particular 10 things rather than other things. One of the reasons why is the focus in the pre-scene. So what I'm going on there is the space devoted to the issue in the actual pre-scene. So you have to think when you're looking at the pre-scene, the examiner is writing the pre-scene and they're thinking about what kind of exam questions they're going to ask in the exam in November. So if they put a lot of space, they put a lot of words on a certain issue in the pre-scene, there's a good chance that they're planning a question for that in the actual exam. In addition to the space, they might put a degree of importance on it. Sometimes when you're reading through the pre-scene, it's just very clear that something, maybe just a single line or a paragraph, it's very clear that the examiner puts a lot of importance on that simply by including it at all. Some information might seem unusual to include in the pre-scene, and in that case is usually a sign that there's an exam question being prepared for that issue. I'm also thinking about the strategic importance. So what issues are likely to come up for this company given what we learned in the strategic analysis and the strategy we came up with, the importance to SWOT. So in the previous video in the strategic analysis, we looked at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats for GymFit, and we came up with a strategy for them based on that. Now, the more likely exam questions are going to be ones that relate to the strategic importance of the company rather than random things that don't really relate to what the company might actually be doing. We also need to think about the importance attached by the directors. So key information we get in the pre-scene, we get a page or so of information specifically about the senior management and the directors, what their aims are, what their past is, and what it is they might want to achieve. So you have to sort of read that and understand that as well and think, well, okay, the IT manager, for example, she's interested in innovation. Maybe there's going to be an IT question in the exam. And perhaps most important, rather than the focus in the pre-scene and strategic importance, is my experience. I've been recording these videos for several years now. I've been involved in lots of operational case study exams, and I've seen all of the past exams. I always look through the past papers. I have a good idea for what kind of things come up again and again in these CIMA exams. And so things that come up again and again, they tend to come up in the future too. So I've got a good idea of what kind of topics the examiner likes to throw at you in the exam. Typical issues, things that are easy to examine, things that are slightly easier to write questions on, they tend to come up more. And that's so how easy it is to write issues on the subject. That's a big part of it, surprisingly. But if you put yourself in the position of the examiner and you've got to write, 8 questions per exam and there's 5 different variants, you've got to write 40 or so different questions on all these different issues. There's a lot. So you're going to pick the slightly easier topic sometimes. Okay, so what's the point in this video? What's the point in me pointing these top 10 issues out to you? Well, it's all about preparation. This is key. Preparation is really important for you in this exam. And the better prepared you are, the better you're going to do in the exam. So one thing you can do is, for the 10 areas that I've identified, what you're going to want to do is prepare key models from the pre-scene information. So of the 10 issues, most cases I'll suggest key models or key theory that will be applicable in that scenario. So what you want to do is go away with that model and maybe apply it to the information we've got in the pre-scene. But remember that once you get into the exam, though the pre-scene is still relevant, you need to adapt to new information that comes up in the unseen. So if you do your pestle analysis or SWOT or whatever it is, and then in the exam some new information comes up that you've never heard before, make sure you adapt your model to that new information rather than just going on what you learned in the pre-scene. Another thing is going to be practicing mock exams. Now, luckily, we at Astranti produce a range of mock exams specifically based around the top 10 issues each sitting. So if you do our mock exams, you'll likely come across several of these issues. And again, once they come up in the exam, you'll basically have already had a first go, or maybe even a couple of goes at answering a question that actually comes up in your exam. Imagine how well prepared you'd be if that was the case and it was a question very similar to one you'd practiced in your preparation. Another thing you can do is find relevant real-life examples. So another product we produce alongside all these videos is the industry pack. And the industry pack is really, it's an examination of the gym industry, the low-cost gym industry. And the useful bit of that are the 25 industry examples that we put in the end of that pack. So what you can do, those real life examples are also based around the top 10 issues. So what you can do is learn or prepare some sample paragraphs. So if it's a particular issue around IT or maybe acquisitions, and there's a real life company that's been in a real life situation very similar to the one in the exam, then refer to that. Say, real life company such and such, actually, when they were in this situation, then when they were acquiring a smaller gym or when they had issues with staff, whatever it might be, they did this. So that's how you would try and use these real life examples. Examiners do like to see that you're doing that. Another thing, an easy thing to do is to learn the typical key points. And by that we're meaning advantages or disadvantages. So for example, if you get a question on the relative pros and cons of something like incremental budgeting compared to activity-based or maybe zero-based budgeting, then it's going to be useful if you kind of know the advantages and disadvantages of those. You don't have to sit there in your exam and try and remember and scribble some down. You need to learn those, revise those, so that when you go into the exam, you can bang them out straight away and get on and get your marks and pass. Okay, and finally, what this video is going to help you to do is to be prepared. Again, preparation is key for which models to use to support the issue. So for models where you can't necessarily apply it to the pre-seen information, you at least know which model to refer to for the particular issue. So for example, if you get a particular issue on human resources or something like that, then you might refer to some of the key theory with regards to human resource management. Who knows what it might be? Hopefully we'll get a clearer idea as we go through my top 10 issues. So the first one we're going to take a look at, and by the way, these are in no particular order. Number 10 is just as likely to come up as number 1 or number 5. They just happen to be in this particular order. There's no priority put to any of these. So number 10, the first one we'll look at is corporate governance. Now, what's the basis of my choice? Why have I picked corporate governance here? Well, for me, it's quite an easy one because we have a publicly listed company. Now, for those of you who are sitting the OCS for the first time, or even if it's your second time, you won't have seen as many pre-scenes as I've seen. I've seen a lot over the years, and most of the time at the operational case study, you have a private family company. So this time we've got a public listed company, and you know what that means. You have to abide by the corporate governance laws that are required to be listed on that given stock exchange. So it's a great opportunity for the examiner to examine you on corporate governance because now we've got a public listed company and they will have to meet those standards. Other reasons, we've got identified non-executive directors in the pre-scene. We're told we have 2 non-executive directors on the board, and so there's mention of the role of the board with relation to corporate governance. It is a key operational topic, both in F1 and in E1 it comes up, so it's sort of double whammy there. And really, it's an important issue for any company. So even if this weren't a public listed company, I might also suggest corporate governance. But in this case, it's doubly important because you're a public listed company. I think this is quite likely to come up. And the key there is for any company, you need to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities for the members of the board. And I feel like there's more focus on the board and the non-executives and the fact that it's a public company than in other pre-scenes. So to me, this is an easy choice. Okay, so the general area is corporate governance, but you want to know more specifically what kind of issues might be coming up, don't you? Okay, so let's have a look at what I think might come up based on everything we've seen before. So my past experience, exams I've seen, strategic importance, all that kind of stuff. So what you might get is a dispute between the key management. Maybe the director of operations has a dispute with the director of properties. We don't know precisely what it'll be. That would be impossible for me to predict that. But I'll give you a good idea of what it might be. So something that could happen, a dispute between management and maybe the roles. Maybe it's an issue between someone higher up than someone else, and you've got an issue there with authority and leadership and appropriate leadership roles. It could be for the preparation of an external audit. We all know external audit, key topic in F1. So an easy way to get that into the exam, if you're the examiner, is to relate it to maybe a corporate governance question. So you're talking about, we've got an audit coming up soon. Are we meeting the standards we need to meet in order to be a listed company? Have we got all our books in order? We might get a question on the role of the non-executive directors and specifically what it is they're doing, what they contribute. Perhaps they're not pulling their weight. Perhaps they need to do a bit more. Related to that is the possible need for a chairman. It's a really important part of corporate governance to have a separate chairman and CEO. Now, in this case, we don't have any mention of a chairman, so we assume the CEO is sort of taking on both roles. But it might be the case that the non-executives are because there's only two of them, maybe they're sharing the role between them. Don't know. There's a lack of clarity on that particular topic, which means it's something that could come up in the exam. Another one could be internal committees. These are actually mentioned briefly in the pre-scene, but setting up internal committees, your audit committee, remuneration committee, those sorts of things, making sure that those are set up and appropriate in accordance with relevant corporate governance legislation. Okay, so if you get a question on corporate governance, there's some key things that you're going to want to mention. So for one, you want to talk about the importance of non-executive directors and the role of the chairman. And this relates to the agency problem with corporate governance and the need for shareholders to have members of the board who are specifically representing them. Now, the agency problem, as I'm sure you are familiar, comes between the fact that you've got the principal and the agent, the principal being the shareholders, the owners, the agents are the directors who run the company on their behalf. And sometimes directors are going to want to manage the company in their own interests, potentially not in the interests of the shareholders. And so you have the non-executive directors and the chairman who are there to sort of speak up for the shareholders and maybe have a more strategic view, advisory role on the board. So they're really important part of a board, particularly for a public listed company. Okay, so related to that point, you're going to want to talk maybe about agency and the agency problem. You're going to want to talk about shareholder assurance, particularly, as I've said again, we have a publicly listed company, so the shareholders are going to want some kind of assurance from the board that their money is being invested and used in their best interests. Finally, we've got the fact that it is a public company, and in order to be a listed company, you just simply have to meet certain standards. Oftentimes, it's a legal requirement. Okay, so there's only really one main thing you're going to want to use, a particular theory or model that you'll use for corporate governance, and that's going to be the UK Code of Corporate Governance. Yes, that long list of dry rules and regulations that you learnt for your F1, maybe your E1 exam. But the key areas here are the things that you're going to want to remember, and those are leadership, effectiveness, accountability, remuneration, and relations with shareholders. If you can remember that, you're going to have a broad idea of what the code covers, and maybe you'll get lucky and you'll get some reference material that specifically refers to an element of the UK Code of Corporate Governance, or potentially it might be a broader question about general good practice with regards to governance. That's the hard thing. That's the thing that's more difficult to predict is the specific nature of the question. But I do think that governance, there's a pretty good shot of something coming up in this area. So just before we finish, I'd like to take you through some of the products we offer in the entire case study course. So this is just one element of the whole course, and I'll just go through with the other things that we offer here. So to start with, we have a study text that is devoted to the operational case study, and that's split into two parts. The first part is a guide to how to pass the case study exam. It's full of exam tips, exam strategy, time management, preparation and planning, how to write to the marking criteria, all those kinds of things. And then part two of that study text is a condensed version of all the relevant material of the kind of things that come up in the exam over and over. So essentially it's the most popular topics that have come up in past exams from E1, P1 and F1. And so those are the two study texts available for the operational case study course. And we also do course videos that are roughly based around that first study text. So the exam advice and the timing, the planning, all the things that go in to preparing an exam strategy. We have an entire series of videos that go through that in detail. So if you're more of a visual learner rather than a reader, you can check those out and they'll be a great help in getting you past the exams. The pre-scene analysis is the series of 6 videos where we look through the actual pre-scene in minute detail, going through every paragraph, making notes and looking how we can use this information to better prepare for the exam when the exam comes up. Separate from that is an industry analysis, and that is a document and a video as well. So the two are in tandem, and the document is about 100 pages looking at the industry in which the company exists. So for example, if the case company is in the car and they're a car manufacturer, then the industry analysis would be an analysis of the car industry. And that's like I say, that's a large document where we break it down, and we're essentially, the point of that is we're doing the research for you to save you time and energy. And the really great thing about the industry analysis is that we include 25 industry examples at the end. So things that happened in the real industry. So the example I just used, it being the car industry. If we were doing the car industry, we'd take 25 examples from the car industry of relevant news and things that have happened to companies and to the industry and consumers or whatever it is. As when we get from those 25 examples, we write a little exam paragraph, the kind of thing that you can literally rehearse and put it in your exam if it's relevant. Examiners do like to see that you have a wider industry knowledge, and so putting in a little example like that can get you good marks. We do mock exams. For the operational case study, we write 3 mock exams, and we have a free mini mock that you can do that are based on the actual CIMA style case study. So they're computer based, they're online, and they're timed, and it's as close to the real thing as we can possibly make it. And that's a really good way to prepare you for the exam. Each time we write our questions based on the pre-scene that's just been released. And with those mock exams, you can get marking and feedback, and that's really essential for you to, if you do your mock exams, I would recommend also getting marking and feedback, because you can then see where you went wrong or what you did well, and the feedback allows you to improve on that. Really important part that a lot of students skip over, and they really struggle in the exam because they weren't prepared, they hadn't done the mock exams. We have masterclasses that run over a course of 2 separate weekends, running up to the exam, and they're a live, essentially a live online class webinar where our tutor will go through with you the kind of a revision one where we're recapping on the most important topics from the E1, P1 and F1 syllabus, and one will be sort of more exam focused. And then finally, we offer pass guarantee, which means that if you meet all the requirements, so you use all these different products that are available, and you fill in a checklist to say that you've done those, but you still don't pass your exam, you're unfortunate or whatever, then we will allow you to reset our course, to take our course again at no extra charge. That's really great for people who are perhaps taking it for the first time and they don't quite pass, but they need to take the course again. If you've gone through that scheme and you've done everything that we ask you to do, then we'll give you the course again for free. Okay, and that's that. Just gives you an overview of the course that we have available.